Hello, and welcome to the Off-Meta Umineko Read-Along podcast, the weekly podcast where I guide my friends and first-time readers through my favorite story of all time, the highly acclaimed murder mystery visual novel Umineko When They Cry. We'll be discussing its narrative and themes, and they will work together with our community to try and solve its various mysteries. Hope you'll join us on this exciting journey as we delve into the Witch's Cat Box. I'm Kyle J, and joining me on our one-way trip to Rokkenjima, we have our readers, James Capelli, Ben, and Becca. Welcome, y'all. So how was your read this week?
I am beyond ready for the Answers arc to begin.
Same.
Point of fact, Answers arc is a mistranslation, actually.
Oh, no.
I had forgotten this was the case, because the Steam version calls it the Answers arcs. It's Chiru, which translates as, scattering. What that means is kind of up to interpretation. Is it the Answers arc? Kind of. It's given that name because in Higurashi, the first part was just Higurashi, and the second part was, breakdown or whatever. It was functionally the Answers arc. It was Answers. So when they ported it to Steam for Umineko, they gave it the same structure of questions arcs and answers arc, even though that's not technically what it's called.
I have one question for you. And I have been reluctant to ask you this for the duration of our read.
Mm-hmm.
Where the story goes and how it ends. You think it's satisfying, right? I know we don't get every answer in the world, but you are pleased with how they present the second half of the story?
Very much so, yeah.
All right, that's all.
It's a bit weird, and it's designed to give you as much as you put into it. The author takes great care to not just, put everything out on the table. You kind of have to, think about what's happening. But I think for our purposes, I think we will very much enjoy as we go through it.
Okay.
Good news for the lost enjoyers here.
Yeah, right.
But I like everything out on the table.
Well, you can just read my summaries then. It's fine.
I will.
I feel like this whole read was the entire experience of human emotion. Just the full spectrum.
I fully agree. It was a wild ride of twists and turns. I didn't expect what was going to happen. I didn't know where it was going, and I don't know anything at all.
Except that it's a sci-fi story.
It might be. I'm not sure.
That's what I like to hear. 1 foot in the door, 1 foot out the door.
At this point, I don't know. There are some parts of this final read that I just completely gave up on. In terms of trying to understand what was happening. And I'm resigning myself to the fact that there are some parts of this that are just meant there to evoke emotion more than to tell a story.
God, you're putting the words right in my mouth. Yes. The first half of this section, that's exactly how I feel.
Oh, that's not the part I was talking about.
Really?
Yeah.
All right, well, I want to hear what Becca has to say, and then I guess we'll get into it when Kyle gets there.
I'm starting to lean into this is more overtly going to be about philosophy and metaphor. I have so many notes that are just half thoughts that I wrote down this reading, where if I really want to dive into some basic concepts of Nietzsche. That's what this reading did to me. So I don't know. Maybe I'll have more to say about that after we read the tea party and I have time to dip my toe back into some of that stuff. But so much of this felt so metaphorical in ways. I don't know. It was interesting.
This week, we're finishing the main content of Episode 4, Alliance of the Golden Witch, not including the Tea Party or question mark segment. And that's about 4 hours of the VN, and it's videos 70 through 71 of the YouTube playlist. If you're not caught up to that point yet, go ahead and stop the podcast and catch up before rejoining us. Or if you're just listening to us along for the ride, welcome aboard. Our story resumes in the cousin's room of the guest house, where Battler, having just heard what seemed like Kyrie getting murdered over the phone, is arguing with Maria. Maria, a fervent believer of the witch, is confused why Battler is sad. After all, now that the ritual is complete, when they arrive at the Golden Land, they can just wish for their families to be revived if they so choose. Maria gives her a creepy witch laugh while talking about how she is going to revive the good mama who will stay with her forever. Battler begins to think there might be something wrong with Maria. But now is not the time to argue. With all the hostages dead, Battler leaves to go and try and find the culprit himself so he can confront them. However, just as he's about to leave the guest house, the phone rings once again. Battler returns to the room to find Maria chatting happily with the person at the other end of the phone. Battler demands that Maria hand the phone over, and after she does so, she immediately heads out to the location of her own test. When Battler does finally bring the phone to his ear, he is greeted by Beatrice, mockingly greeting him in English. Beatrice is calling from Kinzo's study, where she is playing Kinzo in a game of chess, while drinking her way through his expensive vintage wine collection. Drunk off her ass, she says, "Come to think of it, even though we've hurled insults at each other over and over again, this is the first time we've had a conversation like this on the board during the game, isn't it? How very fresh." Telling Kinzo that she has changed her mind, she sends him to go conduct Maria's test and tells Battler to meet her in front of the mansion for his. Hanging up angrily, Battler heads out into the rainy night.
I was very intrigued by the idea that Kinzo was going to do Battler's test and that, Beatrice was just going to go do Maria's. It's like, obviously she's in a favor of Maria, whatever. But it's like, I've been waiting since the start of the fucking story for Kinzo to, sit down with Battler. And as we got, more into chapter 2 and 3, Kinzo with Maria as well. But I was like, man, what would it be to, have Battler test his mettle against the Shakespearean, mentally health challenged man himself? I wish we could have seen that universe.
Yeah, we only ever get to see Kinzo there when Battler was in furniture mode. That's the only other time they've really been together.
Yep. For a brief moment.
I feel like that face-to-face is yet to come.
It probably will, right?
I feel like they're building more toward it with Kinzo. This was the first episode where Kinzo had a really active role in everything that went on. And I hope we do get to see it. That would be cool.
Do you guys think that the test that Kinzo gave Maria was the same, which of the three do you choose?
I think it has to be, because if Battler's would have been different, I would say no. But because Battler's was the same, and they didn't even have a third answer, I think Maria probably, I don't know what Maria's third answer, but I think Maria would just answer it, very quickly.
Maria's answer is just her mom.
No, because her mom's already dead. In the case of Canon and Shannon, they both had people that were still alive as their third answer. My guess is that it was Beatrice, actually. Is that it's Maria, Beatrice, everyone else. And that my guess is that she would sacrifice everyone else to save herself and Beatrice. And it would be so convicted in what she is saying that would pass Kinzo's exam with flying colors.
Maria fully believes that everyone will be resurrected.
Yeah.
So, she doesn't give a fuck about killing everybody. She's just going to kill everybody.
I think Kinzo is probably very interested in her resolve on that point. Either way, I still cared more about seeing what Battler v. Kinzo.
Well, maybe we'll see that.
Maybe Kinzo would have finally avoided the fate of becoming a roast sausage.
It's interesting that he's died that way every single time. Except for time.
No, every time.
2.
No, every time.
Oh, I guess. No. Didn't he make it to the Golden Land?
He did, but didn't he?
2? Yeah.
Didn't he burn in that? Or did he get devoured?
No, he was eaten by the goat nobles.
Yeah, but in episodes 1, 3, and 4, every time he was burned alive, and he's the only one that was.
Unless it's not him.
I don't think it is him. I fully believe that actually Kinzo is dead. But I have no proof to back that up because the way that this story ends gives me nothing to believe anymore.
That's fair. Yeah, we'll definitely get more into the solving aspects of things in the next reading for sure. On the way to the mansion, Battler stops the Rose Garden storehouse, hoping to recruit Gohda and Kumasawa in preparation for confronting the witch. Banging on the front shutter to no response, he heads to the back window and peeks into the dimly lit shed. Inside, he sees Kumasawa and Gohda dead, hanging from nooses tied around the low-ceiling beam. Realizing that he's the only person left alive not associated with the witch, Battler trepidatiously heads towards the mansion. Passing by the gazebo in the Rose Garden, Battler finds George's corpse, killed by what looks like a gunshot wound to the head. George's corpse is the final confirmation to Battler that all of this is really happening.
To be honest, though, I didn't expect Gohda and Kumasawa to have died there. I expected them to actually be, missing or gone from the shed. Other than the confirmation that we know that they had, kids and, a family, and, their kids didn't seem to be, in on it in any way, based on
We don't know anything about Gohda's family.
No, okay, sure. But at least Kumasawa's, we don't know anything about. I think Gohda is still very, like, nebulous in a sense. But I was getting more and more just thinking that they were just in the wrong place at the wrong time kind of characters that help move the story along, because if it was just the family, that would be boring if there was no outside, like, perspective or influence. But now I just don't know. I don't know what would cause them to have done that, except for blackmail.
You're forgetting the very prevalent theory that Hayley and I have been in full support of, is that Kumasawa done it.
Kumasawa didn't do it, though. I don't think so.
Kumasawa done it somehow. I have to speak up for this.
Hayley also has the theory that Maria done it, and I buy into that way more than Kumasawa.
Correct.
Porque no los dos?
Because they can't both have done it, and then you say, oh, we had it right.
People can't be in cahoots now? Are you telling me that people can't be in cahoots with each other anymore?
That's not your theory. That's not your theory. Your theory is that one of them done it, so you either buy into their partnership or they're doing it individually.
Me saying Kumasawa done it does not preclude that Maria also done it, okay? I am very open-minded.
But they have not had a conversation this entire time.
Until we open the box, they all done it, okay?
They all done it, yep.
It's true.
And you know how that's possible? If it's a sci-fi story and technology allows the different threads of time to interweave. Game, set, match, Capelli. All right.
Something you said before this, before our recording started, makes me very much realize why you're so stuck on the sci-fi thing.
What is that?
I can't talk about it.
That's with 13 Sentinels?
Yeah, we'll just edit it out. What is that?
No, it is just 13 Sentinels.
No, I just mean, like, sci-fi stories tend to give themselves way more leeway than fantasy does. I find a lot of fantasy stories will give themselves more limitations on, like, what magic systems allow for. And I'm a big fan of Brandon Sanderson, all right? And that man will write himself as much leeway as he wants. I still find sci-fi is like, oh yeah, our technology just says we can do it. I know I haven't mentioned this in the last 4 books, but in book 5, it's a thing.
Yeah.
Sci-fi tends to, like, book 1, I am establishing myself, and I'm very unlikely to deviate from that.
Yeah. Fantasy wants to build a world, sci-fi wants to build a story.
Yeah, and in this game, I'm going to say it again, in this game, it seems to very much, like, introduce elements as it goes on. Each chapter is something, like, added on. Like, in this one, I'll very much say, like, the blue text, or what we're going to come into soon is that now other people, like Battler, can say the red text if they just put their mind to it, which is stupid as fuck if you ask me, but I'll get there. And sci-fi stories do it so much more often where they're all in a simulation or whatever. Like, I don't think we're going to get to that point where the answers are just like, oh, JK, it's 2100s and you're playing an AI simulated game or something. I don't think we're going to get into that. But the game has left enough of, like, an open door to a lot of areas where if that was the explanation, it could be easily rationalized. Not satisfying, but rationalized. So that's why I buy into the whole sci-fi thing.
I feel like the story does a lot of that stuff with magic that you're saying sci-fi likes to do, though. That it's just,
I agree.
It's doing it in a fantasy way, though.
Yes. And so, like, that's the whole thing where it's like, what they do with fantasy in this story is very different. And this is a Japanese author, right? So we'll say Eastern fantasy versus Western fantasy. And I have read, like, 1, maybe 2 Eastern fantasy novels, but that didn't do this. None of the Western fantasy stuff does stuff like this. And so that's why I'm like, what they're doing, it lines up more with Western sci-fi stories. So I'm well read. I'm not that well read to know what all cultures do with their genres, right?
Mm-hmm.
One man's sci-fi is another man's fantasy.
Yes, I love it.
In all honesty, bringing it back to Gohda and Kumasawa, the thought that I had in terms of them committing suicide was, I'm not convinced that they're the ones that actually killed themselves. Who the fuck knows what could have happened there? But there's something about the way that it was presented. It was so solemn, and, like, there was no fanfare around it, and there was no, like, real fuckery around it. Like, it was actually just kind of like peaceful in an upsetting but like true feeling way. So I thought about what would actually drive them to maybe make that choice. And I wondered if maybe suicide, if them killing themselves removes them from contention for contributing to the resurrection ceremony. Like if they were trying to take themselves off the board.
But did they know that much?
Kumasawa does.
Okay.
She's furniture.
Yeah. No, is she? She's never been referred to as furniture.
But she is a witch.
Is she?
Yeah, she's something, and she's been retaining something, is my sense.
No, I don't think she is. I think that, like...
I believe it.
Going back to my old theory about Battler didn't see it, so it didn't happen, sort of thing. Like, the whole fight between Virgilia and Beatrice in episode 3 happened outside of Battler's purview, and he was able to like fight it by like saying, "Where's all the debris? Where's all of that?" Like, there is a possibility that Kumasawa is just kind of like a goat in this case, like to be used as a pawn for how Virgilia spawned on the game board, but isn't actually like part of this at all. And that's more my theory than anything.
I'm going to go download and boot up the fighting game. And if I am able to select Kumasawa as a fighter, knowing nothing else, that opens up so many doors. Right?
I mean, she's just going to be hitting people with fish.
Smack with the fish.
So let's...
Smack of the mackerel.
Well, let's assume that Gohda and Kumasawa's death is going to be presented as a locked room mystery. How does it get solved? Like, do you guys want to spend 5 minutes to be like, what do you think it's going to be?
No.
I do.
No.
I don't, because I don't think that we have...
outvoted.
I don't think we have... If we haven't been able to solve any of the previous locker room mysteries, I think we have even less information about this one.
Well, I guess we can like at least theorize what the first few points are going to be. Number 1, Battler will be like, they killed themselves. Red Text is going to say, no, they didn't. And then number 2 will be like, all right, we'll go to convince Kumasawa to kill us. Like, Gohda did it, or Kumasawa did. And they're going to be like, no, they didn't. And so then it's going to be, okay, I gave a key. They gave the key to somebody outside who said they'd open it up and they would help. Right? And that's not going to be red texted away. It's going to be, I refuse to repeat that. Why? And so then we're like, okay, well, that's a thread to tug on. Is that something that we got? Who could have gone up to them at that point?
We knew the exact whereabouts of everyone at the point that Kumasawa got locked up.
Yes. Well,
unless there's someone we've never heard about.
Not Beatrice.
Which there still might be.
Not Beatrice. I'm just saying. Because Kumasawa knows Beatrice exists, Beatrice shows up, says who knows what, convinces them to get the key, they open the door, maybe they leave and do shit, and then they get put back and killed.
That's not her style, though. I don't know. No, here's the other thing. By the time that Battler finds Gohda and Kumasawa dead, the ceremony has already succeeded. She has already killed enough sacrifices because the only 5 people left on the island are Battler, Maria, Gohda, Kumasawa, and Kinzo. She has killed 13 people.
The other 5 all... actually, to the style point, the way that the other 5 died, the 4th through 9th Twilights or whatever, I'm not getting that completely correct.
Sure.
Those weren't her style either. They were just shot. Like, they were shot by either... like the golden sniper things or whatever once they escaped the well. Cannon fell down. Nanjo and Shannon got shot immediately outside the well. Kraus got shot on the way to the house, and Kyrie died in the house. None of that was flashy.
Right, but all of those deaths were being orchestrated by Kinzo, the piece that is Kinzo, at least at this point, because this is the first, like, Beato being on the phone with Battler is the first time she's shown up on this game board.
Yeah.
She hasn't even, like, appeared until now. So that was her all working through other pieces that were on the board. And so, like, that's why her personally going to Gohda and Kumasawa after playing this entire round by shuffling other people around wouldn't make sense to me.
Just saying.
I see that.
It's a possibility for the blue text.
Yeah.
But the other thing I wanted to touch on here was that the way, not gotten very far, but the way that the way Maria talks about resurrecting Rosa in the Golden Land, like how she'll always be with Maria and fight for her, makes it sound like Maria wants to revive her like as a piece of furniture. And it's the first indication that has like overtly alluded to, like, we know that people in the Golden Land are like a little wrong and under Beatrice's influence, but this is the first time I've considered that they aren't like literally revived like they would be on Earth, but it's not even them as a human anymore.
We do get to see an example of that later on when they're in the Golden Land, which we'll get to later. But we see Maria say, like, I can revive as many mamas as I want. She revives a Rosa for a second.
Exactly. So, yeah, it's crazy. I also really loved Beatrice saying, long live my flesh. She, drunk Beato, like, what a queen.
Those were most of the messages I got from you, Becca, was just drunk Beato.
I support drunk Beato antics.
Arriving at the mansion's front entrance, Battler looks around for any of the numerous minions Kyrie and the others claimed were working with Kinzo. However, he finds no signs of anyone else present. Under the awning of the entryway, Battler finds a small box, but chooses not to open it, wary of a trap. As the clock in the mansion strikes midnight, the sound of laughter draws his eyes up to the balcony above the entryway. There he sees a woman he was only seen in the portrait, Beatrice herself. Battler, still holding his makeshift spear, looks around expecting to be attacked by one of Beatrice's minions while she watches on from above. However, she tells him that there are no minions or demons or magic butterflies here now. Having chipped away at his defenses over the course of several games, she can now appear here in front of him openly, the queen on a chessboard now dyed black with her magic. Battler asserts that no matter how much he may darken the squares, though, he'll always be able to look down at the square he stands on and know that it at least remains white. Regardless, whether it be through magic or ordering someone hidden to take him out with a gun, the person before him does truly hold his life in the palm of her hand. Beatrice tells Battler that his test lies in the small box under the patio. Battler says that he has no interest in any test for the succession. All he wants to do now is beat the shit out of Beatrice and Kinzo. Beatrice laughs and says that he is welcome to try. However, the mansion is locked up tight, and he'll have trouble reaching her there on the second-floor balcony. Even so, if he manages to pass the test, Beatrice promises to grant him an audience. After all, she too is but the Ushima family's furniture. Beatrice continues to drunkenly goad, flirt, and laugh at Battler as he opens up the box and reads the letter inside containing the test. Battler's test is much the same as George or Jessica's. However, for his, the second choice, the person whose life is supposed to be most precious, is left blank. Beatrice says that while she obviously knew who George and Jessica loved most, since she didn't know who Battler loved, she was forced to leave it blank. Of course, Battler immediately says that Beatrice is his most beloved and that he will be selecting that option to sacrifice. Beatrice chides him to take this seriously and asks him to tell her who he has feelings for so the test can be properly administered. However, Battler says that he doesn't have anyone special to him right now. Beatrice is disappointed that the test won't work for Battler, saying that she had at least hoped to find out what kind of woman was Battler's type. When Battler then deliberately lists the opposites of Beatrice's features, she laughs and calls him a liar. No, to Battler, the breast sommelier, Beatrice says that she knows that she is precisely the embodiment of Battler's ideal.
The phrase breast sommelier is just truly something.
It's a great phrase.
So much started happening here so quickly.
Mm-hmm.
Like, this was so overwhelming to watch. I feel like there's so much going on under the surface here, but just like to rattle off a couple of things. The art of Beato on the balcony and Battler on the ground. I was just like, I love whenever we get those little splash page things that they decide to fully illustrate. I think they're so fun. And it feels like shit's getting real, but those were so good. But she's furniture?
Yeah, I think that was talked about a little bit earlier, but like she's technically Kinzo's furniture in a sense because he was able to trap her.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, it gets used kind of in a few different ways.
Yeah.
There's obviously like the furniture in the sense of like these are automatons constructed to be servants, like the Shannon Cannon Gohda type. And then there's like you are my servant,
right, via
a contract in the same way that like Ronove is the furniture of Beatrice.
I think the thing that's weird about that is that later on, it's weird. It feels like she is the center of a Venn diagram between a human and furniture, because to be a witch is implied to be human later in this reading. We'll get there. This was also a big win for those of us who love to ship the toxic hate-love relationship between Beato and Battler. Holy shit. She literally tells him, my flesh and soul will be yours to do with as you please. Like, hello? Girl, you are really just throwing it around, aren't you? You know what? Get it. Get it. But then also, tell me the name of the person you have feelings for is just so middle school. Like, it is so interesting to me that we see Beato weaponize these, like, very messed up things sexually and physically, like, violently, but then it always comes back to this, like, petty childishness that she has. It's just so weird.
It is a goddamn travesty that Hayley's not here for this recording.
Agreed.
Yeah.
She would be analyzing the sexual energy of this section specifically so much and so poignantly.
Yeah, there's a lot of subtext in this part for sure.
I think, like, what happens to Battler midway through this section, Lambdadelta freaking the fuck out about it. All the theories that, like, this is all to train Battler as a witch of some sort. The fact that, like, yeah, like, he and Beatrice clearly have this very charged energy of attraction. Even, like, the stuff in chapter 3 where it's like, oh, it's just a lie, but still, like, chemistry is kind of there. And at the end of this one, he's like, no more pretending to be friends or have this friendly energy. We are opponents. I'm sticking to that here on out. Like, all that stuff, like, there is some sort of connection between them, right? And it doesn't have to be like, oh, well, they're going to bang or they're going to be together. I ship it. It doesn't matter about any of that. The fact is, like, it does seem like things were selected very precisely, or like very much like it was a decision to do this in this way. And her being like, oh, well, I'm your natural type. It almost feels like she's trying to force love out of him because of the power that love gives into magic.
Yeah, and to be clear, I'm not as eloquent as Hayley. I'm not just shipping this in a way where I'm just like, oh, I want them to kiss or whatever. Like, obviously, that would be great. Who wouldn't want to see that? But, like, genuinely, what I think is the most interesting thing about the two of them is that they are two sides of the same coin in so many ways, and we continually get to see that represented in so many different ways. And I think here it really comes to a head in an interesting way.
Yeah. We're gonna have to obviously wait for more chapters to get any more hints as to that nature, as to, like, what the foundation for this whole game was beyond Lambdadelta trying to trap Bernkastel. Like, why Battle? Whoever this person is, why them?
Why did Beato designate him as her equal, designate him as her opponent?
Well,
what does she see in him?
I kind of want to read this next paragraph before we keep talking about this, because I think the next paragraph goes right into it, and we have more context after it.
I'm just going to say, surface value, he's the only person to resist her at the end of episode 1.
Surface value, sure.
No, it feels weird to read this line right here, but getting back on topic, Beatrice gets serious and begins questioning Battler. Her first question is why he had thrown away the Yoshimiya family name for the last 6 years. While she somewhat understands that his father's remarriage disgraced the death of his mother, was this throwing away of the Yoshimiya name not a disgrace to his family and blood? Battler asserts that this had nothing to do with Beatrice. It was between him and his father alone. However, Beatrice says the Yoshimiya family name does not just belong to him and his father. The 6 years where he forsook the Yoshimiya family name was a significantly long period where he dragged the Yoshimiya family name through the mud. Still, since he did eventually return to the family register once his grandparents passed, she would give him a chance to purify himself of the sin of 6 years ago. Beatrice's test to Battler is for him to remember, confess, and repent for his sin. Battler is confused, but he can feel the quiet determination of Beatrice's gaze upon him, earnestly asking him as she throws her umbrella away, allowing the rain to likewise fall on herself, until he reaches an answer. Battler says that it may have been childish, but when his father had gotten Kyrie pregnant with Ange and quickly remarried her, it was a betrayal to his mother Osamu. If not him, then who would stand up for her? After years, though, the anger started to wane. And when, at his grandfather's funeral, Rudolph, a man who had always tried to look cool, had gotten on his hands and knees and apologized, Battler knew that it was time to end this feud. It's what his mother would have wanted. He yells that it was a matter just between his immediate family, and the Yoshimiya family has nothing to do with it. Beatrice has no right to judge that to be a sin, and he has no duty to show repentance to her. Anyone he should have apologized to is now dead in her name. Battler's answer to this test is that he refuses to apologize and refuses to repent. However, all Beatrice has to say to Battler's grand answer is that all? Battler pouring his heart out only served to disappoint the witch. Beatrice says that she has no interest in Battler's home affairs. Battler's sin has to do with this place, this island of Rokkenjima. It is his inability to remember that is his sin. Remembering that sin is Beatrice's test of atonement for him.
I think that this scene right here is the most important scene in the entirety of the first 4 episodes.
Okay.
I think this actually gets to the heart of what Umineko is. As a story and as its main plot-telling device and what we will look at for the next 4 episodes or so, just reading this has so much monumental volume on it that like they're putting a ton of importance on whatever is happening here, and they're kind of doing that like, you think you know where this is going after 3 episodes, here's a twist in the story and it just keeps going. I do remember that this part is what made me actually cry, because I think that like there were parts of this storytelling that were just so good at like taking pieces that you kind of had discarded. Yeah, like Battler had gone away for 6 years. Like normal things that a regular author would do. Put in these like facts of Battler, our main character, that like seem like just like background facts, and then bring them to the forefront in the middle of the story to be like, hey, now you have to think about this shit. Like, is so good. It's such an enticing piece of info, and also kind of reiterates kind of what we've thought about Battler being an unreliable narrator, in the sense of he didn't even know he was unreliable. I think that's neat. I think that helps piece together a lot of what we were saying about how we don't have all the pieces yet, because we actually just don't.
The red text did say he's incompetent, you know?
Yeah.
That's true.
I mean, he's incompetent because he legitimately can't. He doesn't have the memories to be competent at the moment. He can't be.
So now Capelli's in support of the red text that he thought was so subjective earlier.
No, I still think it's highly subjective. I'm just saying the breadcrumbs are there.
Mm-hmm.
The breadcrumbs are there, yes.
So
yeah,
that's my big thing, is I think that this scene here and in the up until they leave this scene and Beatrice goes back up to the study is the most important scene of this episode, possibly of this entire half of the visual novel.
Man, I'm not sure, because part of me still feels like this whole thing is just a ruse for Beatrice to try to do what she did, which is to abandon the game because of the pressure that Lambdadelta has been putting on her.
I think this is what causes her to choose to abandon the game, because Battler cannot answer it, and I think she is genuinely disappointed.
Okay.
But wouldn't she know that he can't answer it? Like, where's the disconnect here? Like,
I mean, she even says later that you're dead. Like, the real Battler is dead, so she knows.
Did she say that the real Battler is dead?
She says that in black text.
Not in red, yes, I know. But she says the Battler of 6 years ago is no longer alive.
And she says that, like, the fact that you don't remember the sin is proof that you are not, in fact, that Ushirimiya Battler.
And that's the whole thing, is, like, it's what this story does so well, which is, like, maybe it's this, but maybe it's that, and I'm not going to give you enough information to differentiate between the 2, or 3, or 4, as the conversation may go.
But that's also really metaphorical, just in terms of how people change over time and how experiences change them, and how people choose to live certain ways and think about certain things and forget certain things. Like, the Ushirimiya Battler of 6 years ago is not the Ushirimiya Battler that she is facing now. And I think the reason she's so disappointed is she wants that Battler from 6 years ago, or she at least wants him to remember that Battler from 6 years ago.
Or at the very least, like, that's the Battler she wants to fight against.
Yeah, and I don't know if this sin was something that affected her, that hurt her in some way, because she also alludes to it having to do with Rokkenjima. So she is the Witch of Rokkenjima. So what did he do that affected Rokkenjima or the family or maybe her situation? And he says to her later when he's like trying to figure it out, he's like, your eyes want me to apologize. The story puts so much emphasis on how seriously Beato is suddenly taking this conversation.
Yep, that's why.
Literally 30 seconds ago, she was like drunkenly flirting with him.
Yep,
like,
exactly.
It becomes so serious for her in a way that it has so much weight. I think Ben is really onto something with how important this scene is. And I feel like the reason it gets so serious for her in this moment is that Beato does not present to me as someone who has a lot of hope. She's very cynical. She's a witch of unknowable power. She's seen it all, and she's also been a prisoner for decades. She is not an optimistic person. And to me, I feel like something about Battler, something hinges on Battler specifically being able to step up in a way that she needs him to. I have no idea how. I have no idea what any of this is supposed to mean, except that I think she is hoping that he will rise to an occasion, and him failing to do that really just kind of kills the rest of her resolve.
Yeah, I can see all of that being accurate.
Beatrice even appears in the meta world to ask Meta-Battler, but even he has no idea what she is referring to. Battler wonders what kind of sin he could have had from 6 years ago if he didn't even know her, and she wasn't even manifested then. While Beatrice's words affirm that they did not exist to each other then, her eyes continue to accuse him. She says in red, 6 years ago, no person called Beatrice existed for you. The sin I am now demanding that you remember is not between Battler and Beatrice. Battler has a sin. Because of your sin, people die. Due to your sin, a great many humans on this island die. None will escape. All will die. Battler is shocked, and Beatrice clarifies that while he does not carry out any deaths directly, his sin of 6 years ago set this fate into motion. You are one of the causes of this tragedy, Beatrice says. However, Battler refuses to believe Beatrice's words unless she uses the red. Back on the game board, Beatrice asks Battler if he remembers one last time, but Battler still has no idea what she could be referring to. Then, in what seems to be some kind of liminal space still on the game board, a second Beatrice appears. She asks this Beatrice if this long shot of hers, even though it seems to have failed, has brought her regrets to an end. Beatrice agrees and says that this is an end to her regrets and her game, and says that she is no longer interested and wishes to leave the game board. The other Beatrice agrees to take over for the rest of the game and take care of all that remains, and the original Beatrice vanishes. While they are certainly the same witch, this Beatrice continues with an ice-cold indifference. The drunk but high-spirited Beatrice from before, gone. Ignoring Battler's angry yelling, she merely shakes her head in disappointment and returns to the mansion, leaving Battler alone in the rain. Returning to Kinzo's study, she finds Kinzo and his underlings continuing the earlier celebration. Kinzo says that Maria easily passed the test, and clearly not noticing the severe change in Beatrice's demeanor, drunkenly urges Beatrice to return to their celebrations. In response, Beatrice burns him alive, leaving only another charred corpse on the floor of Kinzo's study. Nornave and Virgilia ask what is wrong, but when Gap asks if Battler said something, Beatrice immediately turns her into a glass sculpture. The demons all flee, not wishing to experience any more of Beatrice's wrath.
So this is something that I messaged to Kyle that I completely forgot I said when I was watching this. But I recognized this cold indifference that Beato was having toward Battler during that scene as a defense mechanism, like I already kind of said. But something I wondered is maybe part of Battler's sin, maybe something he did 6 years ago attracted Lambdadelta to the island and put Beato in her current predicament. This is a total out of nowhere theory because I don't have any evidence to support this, except why else would Beato be so upset that he's not living up to her expectations unless she hopes he could maybe do something about the larger stakes of her eternal imprisonment?
Yeah.
Like I said before, I'm still upset we didn't get to see Kinzo interact with Battler and Maria. And damn if him not catching fire and dying again. Like, the only way this man has died on the game board is by flames. And I just think that that's just very pro-feminist. of how he treated Beatrice, and she's just like, you don't die like all these other people. Like, no, time and time again, I am going to burn you alive. I fucking love it.
She literally said, burn in hell, motherfucker.
I fucking love it. For all the evil shit she does, and for, like, I don't like many of these, like, characters, like, if I were to interact with them in real life, but in a fiction world, whatever, just, like, fucking go, girl.
Yeah, she's girl bossing.
And I know Hayley will be behind me 110%.
So do you want to return to our conversation about the sin? What are y'all's thoughts on this?
I guess, like, we kind of need to know what sin means to Beatrice, right? I don't think we're going to get a definition. I think it's very much like the definition of sin as common knowledge, like what it means to the average person, fits this scenario. I would like it to be a bit more like the whole, like, Beatrice is 1,000 years old. I would love for them to play into the idea that she is been living for a millennium. She has seen Mesopotamia and Rome and all this shit. Like, even if she wasn't there, like, just seeing the influence on the world, how it rises and falls. Like, if I have a story that has a character that has been alive for half of AD timeline, what they've seen is amazing. And it's just like, I know what manga is. Instead, like, that's what they do. It's just like, that doesn't give me the scope of this ancient being, which is what somebody who is 1,000 years old does. So just, like, give me an idea of what somebody who's 1,000 years old sees as a sin. Not something that a 20-year-old can comprehend, but somebody who's been alive for centuries. Being like, oh, I pissed off my mom one time is not a sin, but, like, you defied the will of millions of people to make a buck, or you choose to let this evil person live so that you would be safe and comfortable, whereas, like, this other thing, like, that's the sort of context that I'd expect a story that gives that sort of scope to. This doesn't seem like something Umineko is interested in investigating. I think Becca is right that we're going to probably see a lot more philosophy, which has the potential for going into something of an ancient being doing. And yes, you can say, oh, she's been locked up. She's been under house arrest for 60 years or whatever. You know, I think that's even more than what is actually going on in the story. But I just want to see more. But you're not going to get a compelling story of a 20-year-old mortal versus that. And I feel like the author kind of balanced them out. So what does she see as sin? It's going to be face value. It's going to be, if it even is a thing. And, oh God, it's just like we've said before, we need to know more of the story of what happened 6 years ago for him to create this so-called sin. I'm not convinced it even exists.
Would you maybe consider the fact that having no real concept of what someone who is a millennia years old would consider a sin is what makes it a compelling mystery? And thing to think about?
I will say yes. The bones are there for a compelling story, but it's going to depend on how they how the author delivers that story to us as not century-old beings ourselves, right? Like, I'm going to go off on a wild tangent here. My best friend works for Naughty Dog. He's got a master's in game design. And I remember when he applied for his master's program, the project was like, design a game for a specific demographic. And he designed a game for, like, middle-aged men who are also fathers as, like, a crossing guard for kids. And 23-year-old me was like, that's stupid. I'd never play that. Well, no shit. I'm not the target demographic for that, right? So what would you even make as a target demographic for people who are 20s, 30s, 40s people to relate what a 1,000-year-old being truly feels after all the shit they've seen? You can't do it and make it truly relatable and make it give a shit. It would be so outside of, like, our realm of comprehension.
Have you gone back and played that game, Capelli?
Well, no, it was like a pitch on piece of paper. He didn't actually build it.
Okay. Are you now compelled?
Oh, yeah. As a father myself, I'm like, just as someone who's older who, like, understands, like, when you make a product, you have a target demographic and you focus it on that. And if it's not about me, I am now able to understand, like, oh, that's how the fucking economics of the world works? Yeah, I get it a whole lot.
Would you buy a game about a crossguard now?
Depends on the price. Because here's the thing, I need to have the time to play it.
Right.
All my free time is basically going to you guys these days.
It's clearly it's gonna be a quadruple A experience, $70 US, 100 gigabyte download.
I bought the $30 DLC for that blue crossing guard.
Yeah,
it's higher end.
Amazing.
Any other thoughts on what we just talked about? Because obviously this part is very strange. We've got a second Beatrice appearing. We've got all sorts of weird stuff happening.
I think like around this point, as much as Ben said it enthralled him, this is the part of the story that just completely lost me. Right? There's just so much going on in the background. There's so many pieces to it.
Oh, that's so sad.
I know, right? Like,
oh, that's so sad. This was the most enthralling part.
I think with the second half of this section of reading that we're going to talk about, in context of what just happened, like, yeah, I'm back in. I get it. But in the moment, I'm just like, we have sat through how many hours of reading to get to the point where it's like, I'm fucking done with this. Like, you keep throwing this bullshit mystery at us with no real scope of what is actually happening. And I'm like, you know what? It's chapter 4. Kyle has said, basically, tongue-in-cheek, it's a good thing this is still called the questions arc, eh? And he turned Canadian for that. It was weird.
Mm-hmm.
And I was like, all right, you know what? They're going to go somewhere with it. And that's why I asked Kyle earlier, is this end up a satisfying story to you? And I know you said it's your favorite story, so I knew the answer was yes. So she's like, all right, yeah, I'm not going to be like, buy out of it or anything. But it's just like, all right, whatever. Pre-teenager Battler did something that pissed off this evil witch that she felt the need to murder his whole family countless times. Why? I can't hypothesize about it. Let's find out.
But the sin didn't have to do with Beatrice.
No.
We don't know that it does. We have no concept. It doesn't necessarily mean that he personally wronged her. Like I said, my theory is that he did something else entirely.
So all of that is to say, it isn't that he directly wronged her, but whatever he did pissed her the fuck off. He was a 12-year-old boy. It's going to have to be pretty drastic. And he has to have, like, knowledge of what he did. If it's something like, I pissed on her portrait because I was a 12-year-old dumbass, that's going to take me out of the story again. I don't think that's where we're going, but...
Sure, I don't think it's that, though. They wouldn't be making this such a big deal if it was, though.
Yeah. I really think it's bigger than Beatrice.
A 1,000-year-old being who demands people respect her? I absolutely... Like, let's go back to, like, the Iliad and the Odyssey. Would beings of that story do this?
No, I don't. I don't think in this story they would, though.
I agree. But ancient beings do this shit. So, like, keeping that in my mind is, like, where I'm leaving that, like, back door to my mind, being like, I'm ready to dip out at any moment if this seems like a bullshit story. I don't know. It's a self-defense mechanism about a fictional story. I need to grow up a little bit more, but part of it, and then, like, the story proving me wrong is how I enjoy this stuff.
Sure, that makes sense. I get that. But, like, for a moment, I'm looking at this as there is some deeper thing that even our protagonist does not know, so there's no reason for us to necessarily know that. And they've gone through so many things where they give us information that our protagonist doesn't know, but the fact that they've kept this from us for so long, but have probably dropped hints throughout the past 4 episodes that we can then go back on and be like, oh, okay, like, that to me is such good storytelling, and I'm just hoping it pays off. Yes, I'm hoping, but I'm more optimistic than having that defense mechanism like you.
I'm gonna break a little taboo here.
Sure.
Kyle, was there illusion?
Don't answer that. Don't answer it. Please don't answer that.
Becca.
Wow!
Becca.
Go, Becca, go!
Becca, close your eyes and Kyle give me a thumbs up or a thumbs down.
Go, Becca, go!
I don't think Kyle should answer it for Capelli either.
I know!
I genuinely don't.
Shut up! I wanna know!
No.
I think that's not in the spirit of experiencing this story.
Kyle's thinking about how to address this. Well, okay, hold on. Here's the thing. There's every chapter, every episode came out with some space and time between. people could have gone back and read it. Mm-hmm. That's just not how we're doing this podcast.
I genuinely think my sense is that there have definitely been allusions, vague allusions, probably things that we would not have picked up on as first-time readers. Like, it's like how Kyle was saying, like, people technically figured out the epitaph at a certain early point, and it's like, yeah, how far out of...
One guy.
How far out of their way did they go to do that, and, like, how much time did they spend on it? You know what I mean? Mm-hmm. Where it's like, if we don't know what we don't know, we might, by the time we get certain new bits of information later, we'll be able to, hindsight is 20/20, et cetera, et cetera.
Yeah.
I don't really care to know. If you want to answer it for Capelli, go ahead. I will take off my headphones.
I guess I want to know what is the context of the question.
If I were to go back, if I were to go back and reread everything up until this point, would I find hints at Beatrice being upset about Battler, about some alleged sin that he would have committed at least 6 years prior to this scene?
Becca wants to scream.
I think the sin is bigger than Beato, though.
It's a well-written story, so I think you would be satisfied.
If he needs to just say, I can't answer that, if he needs to
Becca's just leaving,
I will accept that. But I want to know, because we have a unique storytelling experience here, and I want Kyle to play into that for my ego.
I've said before that the game is, like, in terms of, like, thinking about the game and trying to figure out what's going on, there is a degree of solvability, right? Like, I've mentioned that there are answers, right? So, and you could make the case that by the end of episode 4, there is everything within episode 4 to fundamentally understand this story. That's part of the reason why there is a split between the question arcs and the, as we've already said, not really what the definition of answer arcs is, but there's a split because the first 4 arcs are kind of a whole piece. You can view that as the whole of the story, and you could figure out a lot of what's happening there within that reading.
Like, do I agree that some people could? Yes. Do I think I could? No. If it ended right here, I'd be upset for the rest of eternity. I would turn into a witch, revive the author, and make him fucking write the ending.
Mm-hmm. For what it's worth, Hayley would also be upset because the story clearly ended at the end of chapter 3.
So mad that she thinks that.
I think, Kyle, you, with that statement, have answered my question.
I also just the last thing I want to say, as I alluded to earlier, in terms of this sin being bigger than Beato, I think whatever Battler's sin has done, all of the stuff you were rattling off earlier about due to your sin, a great many humans on this island die, none will escape, all will die. I don't think that his sin is causing Beato to do murders that are the dying that she's alluding to, because she is also still under Lambdadelta's thumb. Like, she is at the whim of a larger power holding her in check as well. So I think she is also suffering as a result of Battler's sin. And that is why I don't think it's just about her. Thank you.
All right, well, we shall see if further things elucidate that.
The one thing I don't get is why, instead of trying to help him remember it, she's then just instead leaving the game board. What is the motivation for leaving the game board, still being stuck, but going to a golden land with Maria, which, again, we'll get to in, like, a moment. But, like, I don't understand the relationship between the sin and the motivation. Or you can call it motivation.
Yeah, I mean, she kind of says that him forgetting is the sin, right? He's like, the fact that he can't remember is, like, part of why she's upset about this.
Yeah.
And this is part of my theory, is that the reason that she feels so let down is that I think he needs to be able to remember it, and he has some action to take in terms of ending whatever situation they're all in. So I think she loses all hope in that moment when he can't remember. And so her only real option is to go hide herself away in her own little pocket golden land with Maria, because at least there she can hang out with her friend.
Beatrice cleans up Kinzo's study with her magic and then calls Battler to the meta world. Battler wonders what is going on with her, and she says that she is done with this game. Battler asks her if she's resigning, but she declines. No, instead she is simply going to abandon this game. Battler says that if she does have some kind of grudge against him, she should just say it clearly. But if she's going to end the game, at least now he will finally be free. However, Beatrice says the battler is mistaken. The game isn't ending, it's just stopping on her turn forever. While she used to have the goal of victory against him, she has lost interest in that, and now will simply leave him here trapped on this abandoned game board for all eternity. The conversation moves to the witch's smoking room, and Bernkastel and Lambdadelta confirm that with no opponent, Battler can never achieve the victory he needs to escape from here. Lambdadelta tries to cajole Beatrice into continuing, and Battler and Ange chastise Beatrice for dragging Battler into this game and then trying to abandon it. With the two of them saying that she has a responsibility to see this through, Beatrice decides to try another tact. Beatrice claims the Battler isn't qualified to be her opponent in this game in the first place. Only Lambdadelta seems to understand what she's getting at and grows worried. Beatrice says that if Battler meets the qualifications, she will continue this fight for all eternity until an outcome is decided. However, if he is not qualified, he will disappear, and the game will be suspended and Beatrice allowed to leave as she previously intended. Battler agrees, and only then does Ange seem to understand what the witch is planning and grows pale as well. Beatrice says that she will ask Battler to repeat some things in red. Battler is surprised, but Lambdadelta confirms that he should be able to do so. Battler says, "My name is Ashurmia Battler," in red. Ange tries to intervene, but Beatrice quickly removes her from this place and continues. "I am the Golden Witch Beatrice, and I opened this game in order to fight Ashurmia Kinzo's grandchild, Ashurmia Battler." Beatrice then asks Battler to repeat a series of statements in red. Ashurmia Battler's mother is Ashurmia Asumu. My name is Ashurmia Battler. It was from Ashurmia Asumu that Ashurmia Battler was born. However, when Beatrice then has him attempt to repeat that it was from Ashurmia Asumu that he was born, Battler finds himself suddenly choking on his words, unable to use the red. Beatrice continues with the blue. Due to the previous repetition request and the refusal to repeat, I proclaim that you are not qualified to be my opponent. After all, Beatrice opened this game in order to fight with Ashurmia Kinzo's grandchild, Ashurmia Battler. This gives you a responsibility as my opponent to declare in red that you are Ashurmia Kinzo's grandchild, Ashurmia Battler. You decline to repeat that. This means the loss of your qualifications. Lambdadelta quickly urges Battler to refute that blue truth with a red, as the rules demand, but all he can muster is another, I am Ashurmia Battler. Beatrice agrees that he might have that name, but people's names are not exclusive. It is possible for multiple humans to have the name Ashurmia Battler. What it comes down to is this. You are a different person with the same first and last names as Ashurmia Asumu's son, Ashurmia Battler. Battler's confused and furious. However, he still can't say in red that he is Asumu's son. Beatrice declares checkmate and says in red, you are not Ashurmia Asumu's son. Furthermore, as proof, he does not know the sin of 6 years ago. No, were he the true Ashurmia Battler, he would not have committed the sin at all. The truth, she says, is that 6 years ago, the true Ashurmia Battler, qualified to be her opponent, was already dead. This Battler is merely a body double, brought in by Rudolph as a part of some inheritance scheme. Battler calls Beatrice's theory absurd, but he's still left not knowing who he is anymore. Lambdadelta tries to intervene, but Battler quickly vanishes into darkness, unable to hold on to his sense of self any longer. With Battler gone, Beatrice says goodbye to the visiting witches and vanishes herself. Lambdadelta asks Bernkastel if she's okay with his outcome, and Bernkastel says that she's surprised Lambdadelta isn't more happy that she has won. Bernkastel turns to leave and says that perhaps they will meet again in one of the countless fragments. However, as Beatrice said about the odds of this Battler being her true opponent, the odds of them seeing each other again are probably a quadrillion to 1. Bernkastel vanishes, and Lambdadelta chases after her. And with that, everyone is gone.
I actually completely forgot that Beato uses "you are not Ashurmia Asumu's son" as enough evidence to claim that he is an imposter. Like literally like a random child that Rudolph took off the street and tried to pass off as his own son. Like, that is such a wild leap to make, and like low-key spoilers for later. I can't believe that it was that one-sided and that Rudolph didn't come up in this conversation at all once, because there are 2 parents, and Asumu was not the one from the Ashurmia family.
Mm.
Yep.
Anyway, it also makes me wonder if Ange knew what Beato was about to say in terms of like who Battler's real parents are, and it didn't strike me until literally today, thinking about it, putting notes in on this document, that they talk about how Asumu and Kyrie were pregnant at the same time, but Kyrie had a miscarriage. Asumu probably had the miscarriage, and Battler is Kyrie's son.
I don't think that either of them had a miscarriage. I think that they're both Ashurmia Battler.
Oh.
Yep, that's it exactly. I think Asumu's son died 6 years ago. He's the one with the sin. And I think that Kyrie's son is who we have on screen.
Oh, there's an interesting thing I was thinking about while this was reading. If you go back, hey, let's talk about red text.
Let's.
So, The sin I am demanding that you remember is not between Ushiramiya Battler and Beatrice. Sure, that's fine. Ushiramiya Battler has a sin. And then because of your sin, people die.
Ooh.
The Battler that we're talking about, not Asumu's son, but Rudolph's son, his sin has already been said is the sin that he cannot remember. It's because it didn't happen to him. It happened to Asumu's son. And because of Asumu's son's sin, try saying that 7 times fast, this is all happening. So it's not because of the Battler that we have in front of us that this is happening. This is due to somebody else's sin. That we don't actually know how they acted, what happened. But that sin caused this whole thing to happen in a course of 6 years to happen on today. But the fact that Battler was finally ready to come in and, like, for this whatever, inheritance scheme, whatever happens, is actually the whole, like, is messing this whole thing up. The fact that Battler, Rudolph's and Kyrie's son Battler, is here is the reason this game is happening, because he wasn't supposed to be here.
So it's tricky because the red text kind of alternates between saying Ushiramiya Battler and you. Right? And so there's still some, like, we say that Ushiramiya Battler is a sin, but then we say because of your sin, people die. Which so there is at least a sin. Even if we are saying there are 2 Ushiramiya Battlers, there is definitely a sin attached to this Battler.
Correct. I think that sin, as was said earlier, I think even, is that he cannot remember the sin of the previous Ushiramiya Battler. And that is what causes the death.
Oh, interesting. I also wonder, where has the true Asumo's son, Ushiramiya Battler, been this whole time? Because this Battler, the one that we're considering Kyrie and Rudolph's Battler, was raised by Asumu. So would she have just kept her real son locked away somewhere? Or is there maybe perhaps some sci-fi trickery going on where memories were inherited by someone? I bet Capelli would love that.
I actually wouldn't. I think that's sort of a writing cop-out. But so here's the thing that gets me with this. And this is, I think, the whole purpose of the start of Chapter 3. You've got all the cousins on the beach, having a good time, reminiscing about shit Battler said that was embarrassing, where he confessed his love to Shannon as a little boy. And he remembers that. And they remember that. Why? If that wasn't the true one?
That's a good question.
So, we have a lot of things to consider, which is that one was possibly held in Kuwadorian with Beatrice, which is where a sin took place, which didn't necessarily have to do with the rest of the family. That's wild theory. We have no evidence to support that. That's the fun part about theories. You don't need evidence to say anything.
It's like a cat box.
The other thing to consider is that they both existed, that they're being traded out. I think the most likely thing is that the Battler that we know is the one that's been around. And Asumu's son was just somewhere involved, did something to either wake up or free Beatrice, took his own life for it. Again, like, it's going to come down to what Beatrice defines sin to be. And a lot of Christianity, the act of suicide is a sin so grievous you don't even get to heaven, right? So, like, that's an unforgivable thing if you don't get to heaven because of what you did was immortal. You could make that argument. There's so many things you could make an argument about.
I want to submit potential thought experiment evidence for my theory that there are not 2 Battlers, that Asumu's Battler was a miscarriage, and that Kyrie's became Asumu's surrogate son, because Kyrie has a mob family, and as we find out later in the reading, her family forgives her affair with Rudolph to broker an agreement with the Ushiramiya family, and if Kyrie is able to say to her very dangerous, fucked up mob family, hey, my son's going to inherit this wealth someday because he is now the son of the Ushiramiya family, but he's actually also part of our family, isn't that useful to you, they would assist in that happening. And this is my crack noir mob theory. Thank you.
Oh, I like that. I like that a lot.
I thought something similar, but here's the thing that I'm getting caught up on, which is why get that complicated, right? You don't need to go that far in because of the scene between her and one of the sisters, Jealousy, whoever it is, in chapter 3. There's nobody around to hear this conversation except for her and that purgatory sister, where she's like, my son is dead. My son miscarried. I still do more contribute to the theory that her son did not. Probably Asumu's son did. Or, the child of Asumu is the one who died. But Kyrie believes it because she has no reason to lie. If she did lie, I'm going to consider that poor writing. It's the whole unreliable internal monologue with the whole purpose of fooling the reader. There's no point to it except to give you a gotcha moment, which I will say, for all the complaints I have about this story, it doesn't do that.
That's very true. I do have a rebuttal to this. I like what you just pointed out, but my rebuttal to this would be the fact that he becomes Asumu's surrogate son still means that Kyrie can't actually publicly marry Rudolph. Asumu still gets to publicly marry Rudolph, and all it really does is save Kyrie from being murdered by her own family for having an affair.
But again, why lie to this mythical dagger flying around? Right? And like a couple of things Kyle has said about the story leads me to believe that if that is what it is, it's something that's just like, or it is just true. She doesn't know.
Or that.
Right? A hospital swap, whatever. I think they shared a birthday. Or the numbers that we've seen that were like, oh, that's Battler's and Beatrice's birthday. No, what if that's Battler's and Battler's birthday? And that's what this whole story's about. And that was a hint that was given to try to, we don't have the pieces. We've said that.
No, they specified that they have the same birthday. Yeah, they said they were by a twist of fate, they were born on the same day.
So the fact that they were born on the same birthday, we're going to find out they were in the same hospital at the same time, blah, blah, blah. Rudolph's jumping back between the third and the fourth floor to be with both of them throughout their, their births, whatever. I think that's just going to be what it is, It's just the only thing that we have to possibly grasp onto with the hints that we've been given, I think.
So you had some qualms with Battler using the red here, right?
I sure did. Suddenly, Battler can use the red, and the other witches are just like, just put your mind to it, Battler. It's just so simple as that. I'm reading through this, and I'm like, this...
Hold on. What was wrong with that? There was nothing wrong with that.
The problem I have with that is everything involved with Chapter 3.
Sure.
The depths that these witches can go to deceive, which I think is fine. That makes for a compelling story. That doesn't bother me. But it's the fact that it's like, bro, you have been lied to so thoroughly that you just accept, like, oh, I can't say this thing in red. I guess I don't know who I am anymore. It's just like, we've been over this, dude.
Well, the red is a real tool, and we've seen Battler use the red before, and him not being able to say that thing means it's not true. It's the way that Beato uses the red to manipulate his line of thinking to make him not consider other possibilities. It's not literally what he's saying with it. That's the problem.
Yeah.
Sure.
Because, it makes sense that he didn't know that he could say it. To me, that makes sense. The fact that he's now realizing that he needs to defend himself, which has never been something that has been brought up this entire time. He has always been the one that had to disprove something else. But this is the first time that the line of questioning has flipped. So why would he have ever needed to use red before now?
He didn't. And that was the whole thing with at the beginning of the episode with the introduction of the blue. We knew that there would always be some kind of confrontation like this.
Yes. We just didn't expect it to be this way. We didn't expect the sides to flip.
It was very exciting.
But even still, this is something that Beatrice can do. Now you suddenly can do it, and you're not questioning the fact these other two witches, who he barely even remembers, they just seem familiar to him. And he's like, oh yeah, this is the thing I can do. I'm not even going to posit that this is a manipulation. He's just going to trust him with the red is done. and then suddenly, oh, I'm being dissipated because I can't say this sentence.
To say that he's being dissipated, it implies that somebody else is doing it to him, which is not true.
He no longer can hold his form because he no longer knows who he is. Yeah.
Yeah, it seems like part of the rules is that he is disappearing in this liminal space that we still don't actually know where the fuck it exists in.
Yeah.
Like, the fact that he's disappearing is because he is losing his own sense of self. The same thing happened at the end of episode 2 with him turning into furniture, basically, and becoming, like, mute. It's the same situation, in a sense. Like, they're losing their sense of self. And he is legitimately being questioned on his own self that he's realizing he doesn't know the answers to. That's fucked up. But the one of the only rules we have about this space is that the red means that it happened and is true. And that is something that I think if they broke that, I would then be out. I would be annoyed and but they haven't ever said that. The two witches were encouraging him not necessarily to use red, but to refute the claim, to keep this game going, because they want the game to keep going. So it's not like they're against him in this case. They're not against either of them. They're for the game. They're for the game, not against either of them.
Yeah.
Man, I don't know. So when I say that this section is the one that took me out, it wasn't anything that we talked about before. It was the whole interaction of Lambdadelta in this scene freaking out. Is that a ruse? Because it doesn't feel like she's got Beatrice under her thumb, which is what the question mark scene at the end of chapter 3 did.
It's not a ruse.
Lambda freaking out is genuine because her entire goal is to keep this game going for eternity, to keep Bernkastel trapped because she has an obsession with Bernkastel.
Exactly.
She does not want Battler to lose this fight to Beatrice, because if Beatrice makes him disappear, she can leave and effectively end. Bernkastel gets to leave. Lambda no longer has what she wants. She does not want this to happen.
As we got to that point, I was like, okay, fine. But leading up to it, I was like, so, like, who is manipulating who here? With these three witches, that's what's so frustrating. I still don't really understand. Is Bernkastel on top of all of this? Is Lambdadelta really the mastermind? Is Beatrice knowing that Lambdadelta is going to do this, so she's on top? And when you have this illusion that there's this backstory that's more important than what's presented to us, and I don't know what's happening with that after how many hours of reading this, just tell me at this point. I'm sick of it. I'm just sick of it at this point.
This feels like a complete 180 from you, Capelli. Like, to me, like, all of this is so enticing.
Mm-hmm.
Like, I think that the dynamics between the three witches matters a ton and is good.
I can only take so much of a carrot on a stick. All right?
I don't see it as carrot on a stick because I see it as the story progressing. This is one of the few instances that I see this story actually progressing where none of the three of them expected to progress, like, where to go. I don't think anyone is in control. Like, I think that they all have their own ideals that they want to happen, that none of them are getting their answer right now. And I think that's cool.
By the end of this reading, I do agree. But in this moment, I was just like,
Oh, interesting.
And I think part of that is we have to limit ourselves in how much we read because of this podcast. I can't just read as fast as I want to read.
Fair.
But I'm like, hey, we're at the end of the questions arc. We're getting into the later half of the reading where things are hopefully going to start piecing shit together. That's at this point what I'm more here for. I have reached the limit of how many questions I can get. I'm at the end of season 3 of Lost, where I need to start getting some fucking answers to stay enticed into the story. That's where I'm at.
That's fair. I would say, I think another reason why I think we're kind of lost in the mist a bit is I think we've kind of lost sight of the mystery perspective for a while. Like, we've kind of lost sight of, like, what the story is trying to do from a mystery side of things.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that this moment is kind of not the Battler name part, but the sin part. It's kind of like a tying between the mystery angle of what is the motive of this crime with the fantasy side. It's like, here is the connection between the mystery and the fantasy perspective on, like, why did this happen? And it's kind of reminding you to think about that.
I like that.
And I'm fine with that. But, like one of the other things I was thinking about is, like, right, see, chapter 3 was supposed to be way harder, right, initially, then you change it. I think we would have seen this whole who is the true Battler thing. I think that would have been in chapter 3 originally.
I can see that.
No,
I think it was. because the reader goes to chapter 2 where it's like, what the fuck is going on? And then chapter 3 is like, you don't know who he even is. There's nothing to ground the reader.
I disagree, because I think that this is one of the most enticing things that they could give to keep them ready for the next arc. Is that this whole truth, this entire thing that I said is like the most monumental like paragraphs reading, is what drives the beginning of the answers, quotation answers arc, because it is such a different piece of info that actually, when thought about, makes a lot of sense in what the backstory that's been given to drive how these things start to get solved. Because up until this point, where Beatrice says that she wants to leave the game board, there has been someone orchestrating this entire thing, and it's been Lambdadelta. Lambdadelta has been organizing this entire thing up until this point, and now it splinters. And now they realize that no one is in control, because there is such a big story going on that is bigger than any one of them singular. Like, and that's what drives the next arc, in my opinion. I don't think that they would put that before. They wouldn't put such a big piece of info not at the end. Like, that's not something you put in 3 episodes before a cliffhanger episode ends the season of a TV show. This is something you put in the last episode.
I think I'm just gonna start playing the fighting game.
I don't know. I assume that means that you agree, Becca.
Yes, I'm applauding Ben. You know what's bigger? You know what's bigger than the witches? Kumasawa and Maria done it. That's it. We solved it. Moving on.
Yeah.
All right, cool. I think we're done reading now. Cool.
I think the other thing that makes me so pessimistic is I'm so confident that the ending is going to be like Kyle said, the one choice we get is going to be at the end to decide, was this really a fantasy? Was this really a mystery? And in the meantime, it's going to be like, look, it's the psychoanalyzation of the story is like, this is all a coping mechanism for a brilliant little girl who had been horribly neglected by her mom and abused. And I think there's a lot of merit to a story that does that. Not saying anything bad about that. But if you're going into this with a huge mystery, like if you can rationalize the whole epitaph away to say, like, this is just a smart little girl who didn't know how to cope with her mom being a horrible person to her, having no support system, and making her own support system in fictional animals and imaginary friends. Like, what does that mean? And so am I divulging so much of my investment into a story that it can be so easily wiped away by the author if they so choose? That's frustrating to me. All right, that's just how I feel about stuff.
I just don't think that we are in a position to be able to judge what the end of this will be only halfway through.
And normally, I would agree with you if I was reading the story at my own pace. But instead, Ben, you and I started this fucking story a year ago with Kyle, and I need to know what fucking happens. And I am being forced to go at a slow rate and analyze this little witch man, the host of the show, and all his little summaries of these paragraphs, and dissect piece by piece. And I gotta say, I want to get to the second half of the story, okay? I want some answers.
I would like to see it to the second half of the story, too.
I agree that I want to keep reading. I don't think I'm, like, and I'm an impatient person. You ask anyone that is close to me, they know I'm an impatient person. So I get it. But at the same time, I just don't think that we have the pieces.
Agreed. With how drastically every episode has varied from the one previous to it and the amount of new information we get every time, like, I still feel like we're barely at the tip of the iceberg with everything that's going on. And also, I feel like, yes, we are going pretty slow, but I have found this to be an incredibly rewarding experience because I'm thinking about this story more than I usually get to think about most stories that I just love to binge and consume. And it's really sticking with me for that reason. And so I'm enjoying it a lot.
Big agree.
Yeah. And yeah, of course, there's pros and cons to our reading style for sure. In terms of your questions, I think once we finish the question arcs, we're definitely going to have some episodes where we're going to talk about, let's look at this from a mystery perspective and see where we stand on that, because I think that's kind of what the story asks of us when you finish the questions arc before they start revealing more details. So we're definitely going to have some more mystery-focused stuff in the future. In the Dark Void, just Beatrice and Maria remain. Beatrice says that magic should have only been used within Memoires Sorcier, that bringing in outsiders was a mistake. Maria, however, says that magic was too much fun to try not to share with others, but in the end, they only needed each other. The darkness resolves into a magical version of the Rose Garden, full of golden roses as far as the eye can see. Beatrice cries, wondering where it all went wrong, and why she even started this game, and Maria comforts her. We return to the future Ange timeline, where she is finally approaching the island of Rokkenjima by boat. Amakusa is listening to a jazzy tune by Zaki, which is the actual name of the song's composer, as well as many of the other songs in Umineko. Captain Kuwabata points out the location where the island's harbor used to be, but it stirs no memories for Ange. Ange asks about the second harbor, the hidden harbor that was used to transport goods to the island's second mansion, Kuwadorian. According to Captain Kuwabata, only Kinzo, Genji, Dr. Nanjo, and Kumasawa knew of its existence. Given that he was often responsible for delivering goods to that port, he can confirm that a woman was likely living there, though he never saw her or the hidden mansion himself during that 20-year period. Then, one day, about 30 years ago, roughly 1968, Genji suddenly ordered for the regular deliveries and trash pickups to stop. It would seem that the woman staying there had died. And yet, for some reason, Eva had escaped to this supposedly abandoned, unknown hidden mansion to escape the tragedy of 1986. Unfortunately, now, there is no way to access Kuwadorian by land or boat. That is, unless there really is a 2-kilometer-long tunnel running underneath the island between the two mansions.
Okay, but this tone shift, though. You're like, you get to the end of Beatrice and Maria, and suddenly a fucking saxophone starts playing. As someone who has a degree in playing saxophone, I was very off-put by this.
Right? I felt the exact same way.
I was just, I messaged Kyle during that, and I just, what was it that I said? I said, the saxophone, what the fuck, in all caps.
I felt the same, but I was still totally okay with it. I was like, this is a good moment to shift from the super serious, like,
it was very funny.
What is happening, to be like, oh, we're stepping away from that story to go to this one. I loved it. I thought that was a good transition, especially with the little, like, the music change.
Yeah, they use the saxophone as kind of like a leitmotif for the Ange segments. So.
I'm gonna use this section to talk about how much I fucking loved all the new music in this section too. Like after this point, we get like 2 or 3 new tracks, and I'm just like, hell yeah.
I also just really appreciate that Amakusa is like out here subverting stereotypes because, you know, he dresses like an emo boy, but really he's a jazz boy, and I appreciate that.
Arriving at the shore, Ange asks Amakusa to stay behind, not wanting his toxin to interfere with her visit. Ange walks the long, twisted, and overgrown path from the shore towards the mansion, sensing the witch's presence all around her. Passing a construction fence, forbidding entry, she finally arrives at a small hill just before a steep downward slope, likely caused by 12 years of erosion and landslides. Regardless, from this vantage, she could see a vast view of the island before her, likely including where the mansion was. However, with the cliff-like descent before her, she is unable to get any closer without likely being unable to return. This is the border between 1986 and 1998, that day and today, and this world and the other. This is the journey's final destination. Ange apologizes to Mammon and Sakataro that she can't go any further. While this has once been a journey with death at its end, Ange now has a mission as the final daughter of the Shirime family, and as the final witch of Memoires Sorcier. Ange calls out to Maria, and tells her that she understands magic now. She apologizes for the way that she had trampled on Maria's magic all those years ago, pushing it and her towards the dark. Ange stands on the hill with Maria's grimoire held aloft, the wind flipping through the pages like the passage of time, happy and colorful magic turning dark and hateful. It is Ange's duty to repair the damage that she did to Maria's heart and transform her back from this evil black witch to the kind white witch she used to be. Calling out to Maria, Ange suddenly hears the sound of footsteps approaching. However, they do not belong to Maria, but to Sumadera Kasumi and her thugs, the toxin quickly breaking Ange's connection to Maria. Ange quickly realizes that Kasumi and her armed goons are likely planning to take advantage of the secluded nature of the island to kill her and take the inheritance for the Sumadera family. Kasumi still holds a grudge against Ange for how her mother, Kyrie, had abandoned the Sumadera family to become Rudolph's mistress, and as a result, Kasumi had been forced to take her place as the heir, even up to and including marrying the man that Kyrie had been arranged as a fiancé at the time. Having previously been able to live a life of luxury as the princess of the Sumidera family, her life was turned upside down, and she suddenly had to shoulder all of the training and responsibilities that Kyrie had shirked to go and live a happy life of her own. Ange continues to mouth off, and Kasumi orders her men to beat Ange while she continues to smoke and explain her hatred for Kyrie. Maybe by killing Kyrie's daughter here, she would finally be able to free herself of the hatred of her long-dead sister. Sakataro and Mammon are only able to watch on as Ange's beating reminds her of the way that Aunt Eva would punish her, not caring for any actual purpose, contrition, or learning. Ange thinks back on the lives of Eva and Rosa must have endured, pushing their suffering onto others in an attempt to escape from it themselves. The chain of suffering and sadness perpetuated endlessly into the future. However, Maria had broken that chain, her magic able to take on all that pain and exorcise it. It was the Black Witch's magic, the magic of pushing her pain onto others, that Beatrice had taught Maria after Sakataro's death, that had infested Eva's heart. The only outlet of a woman who had lost everything and had even been spurned by the only other person who could have understood her pain. Shouldn't Ange, the inheritor of Maria's white magic, have been the one to save her from that path? But she hadn't been able to see it at that time. She had no love in her heart for Eva, and without love, it cannot be seen. However, now she could see. She could finally see that Black Witch possessing Kasumi that had represented all of that hatred and pain, Eva Beatrice herself.
So, I already knew while I was reading this section, I was like, Ben is hating this right now. Maybe not hating, but he's not enjoying himself right now. And I do agree that I think some of this section gets a little bit slow. But I think what we see in this part of the story is something that the entire overarching themes of the story are so concerned with, which are the ways cycles of abuse are perpetuated and evolve over time, and how trauma is inherited from family members one after the other because people just continue to take out their pain on other people. And this is also where it starts to get really metaphorical, right? Where Ange sees Maria as this figure who's able to finally break this cycle and pain thanks to her white magic, which is really just love and compassion for her mother. She's always like believing in her mother and always wants to believe in the best for her mother. And maybe that makes her a little bit delusional, but she is finding something there to care about and to not let it affect her in the way that she would then grow up to have the same pain that Rosa has. And I feel like this is something we've seen so much in this story already and that we're probably going to continue to see.
Mm-hmm.
But like, this is something we see in so much other, like even Western media, like that's Succession. Also dealing with very rich families and expectations and the way this trauma gets passed down and how it affects all of the people involved. Even Severance deals with that a bit, but I don't want to use this to try and pitch you on Severance because I think y'all would actually really like that show, and
it's good, yeah.
There's a lot more going on there than just that. Yeah, everything going on here. I also was just really so fucking pumping my fist. I was so amped when Ange told Kasumi she might as well die because she had no chance of ever being happy in her life. Like, just die then, sure. As her only way of resistance is to just be a smart mouth. And I love that she never gives it up for 1 second.
Mm-hmm.
But also, I think we see here too, like, weird rationalizations. Like, my one problem with Ange saying, I never tried to understand Ava, and I never understood that my actions as a 6-year-old child could hurt my aunt in this way by saying, bring me back my mom and dad, because, I don't know, in that situation, I feel like you're not supposed to expect a 6-year-old to be emotionally mature, but an adult should be able to understand their child niece's feelings of loss. But I did think it was still really interesting how that kind of became Ange's superpower to empathize with these people who we have seen just commit heinous shit against her and other people in their lives this entire story.
I find it interesting, and there are some parts of this that I really like. And I think that it just drags on for a little too long for what I like. But I won't get into what I said earlier yet in terms of this feels very esoteric. But this entire arc, all 4 episodes, focus on a strong is the right word, but it's not necessarily in the sense of like strong and good. It's just strong or some sort of like strength, either bad, evil, whatever. Strong female character. in some way. It's very female forward in the sense of Natsui, in Rosa, in Ava, in Ange, in Beatrice, in Kasumi, in Kyrie. A lot of the main plot points of all of this are driven by the women of this story. And I'm wondering if we're actually going to get kind of a weird flip side of this in the second half of a more men-driven, like masculine, but like masculine fragility and all of that stuff in the second half of this story, and kind of seeing the flip side perspective of it.
Are you telling me that you think we're going to get a Kinzo redemption arc?
God, I hope not.
That's what I need to see all that come true.
I really hope we don't get a Kinzo redemption arc. Fuck that guy.
Kinzo's not alive, so I don't treat him as a man.
Oh, so true. So why?
So I think that there's room, now that we've gone through all of this like trauma cycling abuse of the women. Now we can see kind of what it is on the male side of being like a father figure, a stoic, masculine, in all the wrong ways and all the right ways that it could happen, with people like Rudolph, with Kraus, with Hideyoshi, with Maria's baby daddy, if we ever see that. I think that would be very funny. With Battler and with George. I think that there's room for all of these characters that really have been more side characters rather than anything in a lot of the main themes and stories of this first half, to then show their trauma and their problems in the second half, where it focuses on a little bit of a different aspect of the male experience growing up in an abusive household.
That's going to be another big agree from me.
Yeah.
This whole time I was really hoping in the first 4 chapters that we would see both Battler and Rudolph live past the first sacrifice and then strongly interact. Right? I want to see Rudolph be more of a father to Battler, which the fact that like there's apparently something going on with who this true Battler is, maybe like the fact that we haven't seen that he's a little bit more standoffish and Kyrie is more of a stand-in, is a hint in and of itself. Like all we see is Rudolph kind of ribbing him and being a dad in that sense, but not like a true paternal figure to be a role model. Right. I think Rudolph has the potential. I think Rudolph saw his toxicity and tried to grow from it. But we haven't seen a lot in that. I want to see more of that potentially. I would like to see a bit more of a male figure stand in, if that means showing men being more vulnerable. I think that has a lot of potential in this story to show that, you know, masculinity is self-reflection and growth and doing well by the people you care about. I want to see that for sure. I don't know if we will.
Kraus starting to show some vulnerability is when I actually started to give a shit about him as a character.
Yeah.
Like, that's when I started being interested in him.
So yeah, having him on screen more with his kid, like I love the little bit of interaction that he has with Jessica in this chapter, of caring about her so much and being like, hey, in chapter 1, you freaked out. In chapter 2, you freaked out. Here we are in chapter 4. I'm with you. Stay cool. And she responds very positively to that. I really liked how the story did that. Like being like, hey, maybe this is actually a good father. Right? So what I was expecting with this whole Ange and Kasumi, let me show you my magic. I thought that was going to be her standing up and being like, hey, I see you. I can relate to you. And you have been shit on me, but I'm willing to forgive you for that. And them having a moment. And then Kasumi being like, nah, fuck that, shoot her. And then we see all the Purgatory Sisters with that. Because otherwise all we have is her internal monologue of being like, white magic is me summoning 7 teenage girls to kick your ass.
But we do kind of get that moment at the end when Kasumi is holding her at gunpoint, which we'll get to, and we can loop back to this, but I think we do get that moment later.
We do, but at that point, Ange has the power in the situation. And I think true vulnerability comes better in the sense of, hey, I see you have the power here. to kill me or do whatever you want to me. And despite that, I'm going to show you true empathy and true human connection and true family by saying, I hope I see you. It doesn't have to be like this, and I do not feel the need to be aggressive to you to make that connection. It is now in your court to either reciprocate or deny that. And then Kasumi denies that, and it's like, well, I gotta do what I gotta do. I would have liked that a little bit more. I'm okay with how it went, despite the fact, like, I agree with Ben that this whole scene dragged out a little bit more than I would have liked.
I do think she tries to reach Kasumi. Like, she's been trying to talk and reason with Kasumi throughout this entire conflict, as Kasumi has had most of the power in the situation. And at the end, when Kasumi's holding her at gunpoint, it's like, this is your last chance, and if you still can't do it now, well, then there's really no saving you.
Yeah.
But she's given her lots of chances. And something that Ben said, this is my last thought on this section, but going back to what Ben was saying about wanting to see maybe more of the male side of how they grew up and, you know, what they've been experiencing this whole time. I think what's really interesting about this first half of the story is that women, and especially mothers in particular, are so often expected to carry the emotional weight of their entire family and to be this caregiver who is constantly giving all of themselves to a purpose, to a family, even. Like, you know, this is very, you might consider this outdated thinking now, but that was kind of like the ideal of the nuclear family. And I think with every single female character in this story, we've gotten such a rich depiction of how those expectations and responsibilities really, really mess with them. And it's good. It's good stuff.
So as I was thinking about, as you were talking about earlier, about how it's on kind of Ever's responsibility to respond better to Angie's like rebutting of her when she first came back. We are going to read a side story. I've decided that we're going to do it. There's some side stories that have been released occasionally. The author would have put out little booklets that had some written side stories in them occasionally. Some are released after episode 3, and some are released just after episode 4, right before they released episode 5, I think, that cover some information that I think we're going to want to talk about. So I think I'm going to add those to this next reading. So I'll list those. The Witches Tanabata Isn't Sweet. We'll kind of cover some of that in an interesting way. So we'll have some more to talk about on that next time. Because I've also gotten requests from some of the readers about if we're going to cover some of the side stories. So I think this will be a good time to include those.
I love extracurriculars.
Eva Beatrice's spirit goads Kasumi on, telling her that if she just makes Angie feel all the same pain that she herself was forced to go through, she'll finally find relief. At Eva Beatrice's behest, Kasumi takes the bouquet of flowers that Angie brought and frantically tramples on them in front of her. However, when that fails to evoke a sufficient pain from Angie, Eva Beatrice directs Kasumi to something whose loss she knows will hurt Angie deeply, Maria's grimoire. Kasumi begins mocking each entry in the book, tearing them out and throwing them away. Sakatara and Mammon can still only watch on as Maria's magic is defiled, even as the pages describing their own existences are destroyed and denied. The pair of tormentors then finally reach the last page, a colorful page describing a simple spell. Magic to always be friends with Mama, who I love. A simple short incantation, and Kasumi can't help but crawl out in mockery. Ooh, ooh. The sound that Maria had used to replace the lyrics she forgot as she sang to her mother on one of the happiest days of her life. Despite Angie's cries of protest, that too is destroyed.
I think similar to like how the ooh ooh manifested when Maria destroyed Sakatoro the first time.
Mm-hmm.
Like seeing this, like the whole ooh ooh is her being like, "I love you, Mom." Fucking destroyed me.
The fact that Rosa hates it so much when it's Maria's way of expressing love, yeah, that was pretty fucked up.
Yeah. Like, it's one of those things that's like, let's say we were doing this and we were still waiting for part 5 to come out. I'd go back and reread the stuff, and I'd be paying attention to when the oohs were said. Like, does it make sense for her to say this, being like, "I love my mom," or like, "I'm thinking about my mom as I'm saying this"? I think most of them probably would. And I don't need that in my emotions right now. It's I got 2 kids. I don't need more of that.
It does prove us wrong, though, that it's not a hold the door situation.
We don't know that for certain. Could be many things.
As Kasumi throws the book to the ground and begins stomping on it, Eva Beatrice mocks the uselessness of the supposed white magic. The only real magic, she says, is the magic of pushing your suffering onto others. However, standing from where she had fallen, Ange announces that Maria's magic is real, and she will now show them all. With a sudden gust of wind that startles even Kasumi, Ange summons her furniture, the Seven Sisters of Purgatory. Memon is shocked, as summoning all Seven Sisters despite all this anti-magic toxin should be far beyond Ange's abilities, even at her peak. Kasumi, still unable to see Ange's summons, orders her guards to draw their guns on Ange and shoot unless she is able to display this magic as she claims. Ange tells them to go ahead and fire, and so they do. However, Lucifer deftly catches the bullet with her blade, and Leviathan blows a hole the size of a fist out of the chest of the first guard to fire. Eva Beatrice is aghast at Ange's ability to have her magic actually affect the real world. This, Ange says, is true magic. Kasumi, still unable to see what is going on, orders the next of her goons to shoot Ange, but he is swiftly taken down by Lucifer before he can. The rest of the guards break and attempt to run from their invisible foe, but the rest of the Seven Sisters quickly strike them all down until only Kasumi and Ange remain. Despite her men dying all around her, Kasumi refuses to believe in Ange's magic. Even as Kasumi picks up a fallen gun and points at Ange continues to attempt to reach her heart. However, Kasumi is still unable to let it go, and Ange is forced to have Mammon end her suffering. With everyone else now dead, all that remains is Ange and the Black Witch. Eva Beatrice turns into a black mist and then reforms into Ushima Eva herself, holding a gun. Eva's last wish was to kill Ange, and the Black Witch's power of anger and hatred would empower her to do so even after her death. Eva claims that she blocked Ange from summoning the Seven Sisters, and that a miracle will never occur again. But, as Ange says, it will occur again. After all, that's what makes it magic. As Eva bids Ange goodbye and pulls the trigger, her gun explodes, Mammon having destroyed it mid-shot. With everything finally over, Ange apologizes to the Seven Sisters for having spurned them all those years ago. As darkness falls on the island, Ange suddenly finds herself back on the hospital rooftop with Bernkastel, overlooking the city. Bernkastel applauds Ange for finally coming to understand the true nature of magic, and announces that she is now ready to take on Beatrice. However, now that she understands how magic is made up of love, sadness, and anger, Ange wishes she didn't have to harm the world that Beatrice has built. But, unfortunately, that is the only way for her to save her family. With renewed determination and an understanding of her purpose as a piece in this game, Ange returns to the game board.
Alright. So, when I was talking at the very beginning of this podcast about how it felt very esoteric, this is the part that I was referring to. Everything with the Seven Sisters actually doing something, like in person, in this real life situation, it just makes me go, I don't know what's like real and what's fake anymore, and it just feels like I don't care. At this point, I'm at a point where I don't know if the Ange stuff ever really happened in that fragment, because I don't know yet if magic exists. So what am I supposed to believe? Am I supposed to believe that in this fragment that Ange survived, somehow 7 attackers and Kasumi all died while she just stood there? Or am I supposed to believe that magic does exist, kind of ruining the entire premise of this thing? And at this point, I've decided that I just don't care. And it makes me, it makes better sense for me to think of this all as a storytelling device rather than actual plot. Like, I think that's kind of where I was going with this, is like, yes, our conversation that we just had about trauma, passing it on through the generation, very important, very good to talk about, but the method that they use, the way that they try to make it into the plot, doesn't actually work for me. So I'm just gonna kind of, like, ignore it, and just focus on the lessons learned, as opposed to the process that was used to get there.
Okay.
I think there's also, you could make this argument, like, literally as you put in the notes here, like, what an ending to the Ange in real life saga. Like, who's to say that maybe the Seven Sisters and the magic aren't real in the world where this is a mystery? Maybe Kasumi really just killed her, because the next time we see her, she's floating in the city again, which, yeah, what the hell does that mean? So maybe she died there.
Exactly. But, like, what does that mean then? Why were we showed that entire thing if the real ending was just Kasumi killed her? Like, why were we showed this, like, alternate ending where magic exists? Like, who's telling this? Battler currently doesn't exist, like, in any world. So, like, who us as readers, what device are we using? Are we getting, like, here's what could have happened, like at the end of Clue? Like, when they say, here's what could have happened, and then they just never actually show the this is what really happened sort of thing. To me, that just, I don't love it. I love what they're saying with it. I don't love the method they use to do it.
I feel like I'm hoping that we'll get more context to be able to put this more in perspective at some point later in the story.
Yeah.
That might make sense. We may not, but yeah, it was one of those things where I was just kind of content to be along with the ride. I also thought it was just kind of a fun scene, like getting to do bloodbath things.
Yeah, sure, but how does it fit in with everything else? I've given up trying to fit that in right now.
Okay.
The thing that I landed on here that I thought was interesting, which is what Angie kind of comes to, and this is now my view of magic as I understand it, because Angie keeps talking about how now she understands the true nature of magic, but they never really explicitly say what that is, except for the fact that it comes from love, sadness, and anger. But that's still so vague and could mean any number of things.
Right.
For me, black magic is toxic, destructive magic. You know, things like hatred, irony, like all of these guys laughing at these goofy little incantations that a little girl made up, like, you know, kind of having a jaded outlook. Destruction is black magic, and the white magic, love, is this form of creation. Because Angie finally suddenly gets all of this power because she has something to fight for and to protect, as opposed to just something that she wants to tear down. And we see it later when she kind of uses that to help Battler.
In the Golden Land, the only other members of Memoires are gathered, enjoying this private world they've created together. However, Angie can't allow Beatrice to continue to shut herself away like this and abandon her game with Battler. At first, Maria is happy to invite Angie into their Golden Land, but Beatrice refuses. In tears, she begs Maria to let this world just be between the two of them. That is all she needs. Maria agrees. As long as she and Beatrice are together, all of their wishes can come true. However, Angie knows that this is false. This Golden Land can never grant Maria's one true wish, the return of Sakataro. As soon as Angie mentions that name, Beatrice steps in to shelter Maria, her sadness and anger shaking the rose-filled garden with a storm of gold. Beatrice tells Angie to stop torturing Maria, but Sakataro can't be summoned because of Rosa, his creator's destruction of his unique vessel. However, Angie tells Beatrice to stop lying. The real reason she can't summon Sakataro is because, unlike herself, Beatrice isn't a real witch. To Beatrice's shock, Angie claims that she can use real magic to revive Sakataro for Maria. The only thing she asks for in exchange is that once she has done so, that Maria leaves this Golden Land. Beatrice begs Maria not to accept this deal, as if she were to leave this universe, this Golden Land created between the two of them would collapse. This, Angie says, is only further proof that Beatrice is not a real witch. After all, a real witch can create a universe all by themselves. Beatrice, still in denial, claims there is no way an outsider like Angie could ever use magic here, but Maria cuts her off and orders her to stay out of Angie's way. Beatrice cries and states in red, "This is my Golden Land, a world where magic that isn't mine certainly cannot exist." And yet, to the shock of both Beatrice and Maria, Angie performs her magic, and Sakataro is revived. Maria abandons Beatrice's side to hug Sakataro, and he and Maria promise to never again let go of one another. Beatrice once again says that this can't possibly be magic. This is my Golden Land, a world where magic that isn't mine certainly cannot exist, and my magic was not able to revive Sakataro. There is no way it could. That stuffed animal was a special stuffed animal. Rosa made it for her daughter's birthday, and in the entire world, only one of its kind. However, Beatrice finds herself unable to complete that sentence and read. Realizing the truth, Beatrice falls to her knees and cries. Even she must admit that this is true magic. Angie, the Witch of Resurrection, has done as she said, and so Maria keeps her promise and leaves the Golden Land. With its load-bearing Maria gone, the Golden Land begins to collapse in on itself. Falling into darkness, Beatrice crashes back under the floor of the witch's smoking room, where her game with Battler took place. Angie forces Beatrice to take her seat at the table once again, and Lambdadelta appears, locking Beatrice's foot into her chair with a steel shackle. Bernkastel too appears and summons Battler's body from the ether. However, after having his identity denied, his soul has yet to return. Angie attempts to rouse him and lays out the following blue truth. The one who is qualified to be Beato's opponent is Kinzo's grandchild, BeatoXBattler, and whether that person is Asumu's son or not is not the issue. In other words, you can be Kinzo's grandchild even if you are not Asumu's son, as long as you are Rudolph's son. Beatrice is unable to refute this, and thus Battler regains his right to participate in Beatrice's game. However, this is still not enough to fully revive Battler's spirit, as he still doesn't know who he is. Angie decries that while he may not have the exact blood connections he thought he did, his bonds with his family remain. She has him say in red that Angie is his little sister, and he's surprised that he's able to do so. Angie hugs Battler from behind and yells at him to hold onto those family bonds more tightly. Angie attempts to remind Battler of why he must fight and win against this witch, so that he might finally be able to return to his family. And Battler's soul begins to return. However, it still isn't enough. After all, this Gretel might just be another trick of the witch. He says, I can't trust anything. I can't trust any words that aren't read. Ange knows that there is only one thing she can do. She breaks Lambdadelta's rule and tells Battler the truth. Ange's memories of her sad and lonely days flow into Battler, and his spirit returns to him. Blood begins to drip onto Battler from behind as Ange's punishment for revealing her identity takes effect. However, Ange continues to hold Battler tight so that he might not see the fates befalling her. She as a piece may be sacrificed, but he must go on to win this chess game. When she finally releases him, he turns around to find that Ange has been torn to shreds. A pile of minced meat is all that remains of her. Beatrice casually informs him that she was torn apart bit by red-hot pliers while she held him. Shaking off the witch's casual cruelty, he does what he promised Ange he would do in her final moments. He points at Beatrice and demands that they resume this game. Accepting that not even a miracle will let her win anymore, Beatrice defeatedly tells Battler that he will have to kill her. Putting back on her evil witch affectation, she cackles once again and tauntingly says, Try and kill me. Just try and kill me, you shear me a battler. And then, with a series of gunshot-like sounds, several partially visible red statements appear on screen. I'll show them on screen now, and I'll read them here quickly. Did y'all happen to stop this and read these when y'all were reading?
Oh, yeah.
No, I tried to, squint, but I didn't, pause or go back or anything.
I didn't pause.
It's much easier when you're watching the YouTube video.
I was hoping that you would have them written out.
I literally put it on, 0.25 speed, and I pause it on every single one.
Yeah, I did, a frame-by-frame advance to get all of them. They say, Please kill me quickly. Try and stop me. If only you had never come. I wish I had never been born. Why am unable to love any. Please, I don't. What conclusion? Just kill me and my story to an. If you won't do that, you die instead. I will kill you.
And no, Kyle's mic didn't cut out. Those sentences are missing.
Normally, I'd say, oh, these are all things that Beatrice says, but we just saw that many other people can use it if you just put your mind to it. So who knows?
I wouldn't say it's if you put your mind to it. The red is Rattler had to be given permission by the witches. He had to be granted sovereignty over the ability to make statements about himself. So I don't think it's just something you can just casually do. But we have seen that other people can in fact use the red. That is true.
Yeah, I'm interested to see where these statements come in, because I do feel like each of these statements is going to be shown sometime in the next act. And it's so good. It's such a good ending.
Mm-hmm.
They really brought up the tension, then saxophone, then really boring. Then they brought the tension back up and ended on a really great cliffhanger. So, I really like how this ended, even with the roller coaster that we went on with saxophone. So,
mm-hmm.
I thought that was very good. I'm very amped to read the next one. Kind of like Capelli said it. I'm so ready to go on to episode 5. And I think that this ending really did stick the landing for that reason.
I do really like that this is our first, end of a chapter before question marks and Tea Party. That doesn't, lead to the end of what happens, right?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. There's still things to happen. I've got no idea what they could be. Ben will tell me if it's super exciting when he goes on to read tonight and I go to bed.
Mm-hmm.
I will not tell you because you've told me never to message you when I'm reading.
When I say I cried on my lunch break at work, watching the part with Ange and Battler where she gives up the ghost and she's very clearly trying to prevent him from seeing what's happening to her, I was like, something awful, something so terrible is happening. And the description of it is so gruesome and cruel. And
mm-hmm.
I just, sibling stuff hits me right in the heart in a big way. And I thought that was a really fitting kind of hero end for Ange, because she just kind of had her hero moment where she kind of overcame everything when Kasumi cornered her, where she had her big revelation.
Mm-hmm.
She even gives Kasumi her final chance at redemption before killing her, as you want to see any good hero do, and then sacrifices herself to save her brother, to give him something to fight for again, because I think it ties back into the whole love being the true power of magic thing, because especially as we see in this red text that flashes at the end, I think there is a strong argument to be made that, if not all, a lot of it is coming from Beatrice, because she is resigning herself to her death in the moments leading up to seeing all of that. But also, there's the one that says, why am unable to love anyone, which means maybe that's the thing holding Beatrice back from really achieving true power in the way that she was not able to revive Sakataro, but Ange was. So, I don't know. A lot of this really hit me in the heart with the sibling stuff. And man, I'm really excited to see what we find out about all of that red text at the end.
This story does do family relationships like so well, right? Not just cousins and aunts and parental child, like sibling stuff. It's all like so well weaved, right? Like early on in chapter 1, the start of the story, Battler's kind of creepy with his family, and that kind of put me off. Like, how is that gonna like extend? But like all the stuff with just Ange just so badly craving her family and knowing the life she should and could have had, and just like the way she just hugs her brother, being like, they wouldn't let me tell you who I was. I like unspoken, I love you, please bring my family back to me. Like, it's just so good. She fought so hard to basically just get that one message across, undo the stalemate that Beatrice tried to put up, being like, fucking no, you're not taking my family from me without a fight. My brother's gonna fuck you up. I love that.
Agreed. I also think it's just such a beautiful representation of the way people come back from like trauma, like suicidal ideation, PTSD, anything like that, where like Battler had his entire worldview and identity like literally shattered by Beato, right? And is basically just a shell of himself, a husk, until Ange starts hugging him and reminding him who he is and giving him something to live for, essentially, by saying, these are all of the people that you're leaving behind that care about you. I care about you. I'm here for you, and I'm here to support you, to give you all of me so that you can be yourself and you can keep going. We're all going through it all the time, but that scene also just really spoke to me on that level of being someone who struggles with mental illness and how really difficult it can be to just pick yourself up day after day and keep going. And I thought it was really beautiful and inspirational.
Yeah, especially because for Battler, kind of one of the biggest defining characteristics of his character is his mother, right? That defined the last 6 years of his life was the fact that he sided with his mother over his father in basically what happened after she died. So, like, to have what has defined most of his life is been defined by his relationship to his mother. To have that be torn out from under him, it's not surprising that he was not able to just quickly come back and come up with a new way to argue under those conditions. So, a very tactical attack by Beatrice there. Before we wrap up, I did want to go back real quick to the Maria Sakataro, Ange reviving Sakataro scene. We kind of skipped over that a little bit. Did y'all grok what was going on there? Why was Ange able to revive Sakataro? Why Beatrice couldn't?
There's something with the red truths there that really matters, and I'm having trouble grasping what it is. Like, obviously that's something to do with the way that you have this phrased, and I don't think it's like mistyped. And my magic was not able to revive Sakataro. The and my is black.
Yeah, that is how it is written in there. It doesn't have that part in red.
It's just, there's something with, like, there isn't a world where magic that isn't mine certainly cannot exist. So is Ange using her magic somehow? Like, is she the one that created that version of magic, and it's technically hers in the sense of it was the creation, but she's able to wield it, and Beatrice is no longer able to because she can't love? Like, there's something with that I just haven't been able to fully wrap my head around yet.
I wondered if that had anything to do with the fact that Ange is, when she ascends to witchhood, is Ange Beatrice. She is a successor to Beatrice. So, like, she inherited Beato's magic. So Beato saying, a world where magic that isn't mine certainly cannot exist, I took that to mean that Ange is wielding the same magic power that Beato has, but she can make it more effective in a way Beato can't, because Beato does not understand love.
Yeah, I guess, like, I was ready to come into this conversation just being like, oh, I don't know, it's dumb. But no, that's exactly it. Like, that's the whole purpose of the scene on the cliff between Angie and the black suits and all that, is like, she gets it. Like, she sees her enemy with empathy, without hate, disdain. She hates the people who drove her to this point. And so just like Beatrice being like, I can't do it. She does not understand the love that other people have given, like, in her own twisted way. Rosa has given love to her daughter, not very well, but she has. She gave her Sakatoro and all that. And like Ange's like, hey, as a human who hasn't lived 1,000 years and all that stuff, like, I get it. And love doesn't need to be limited. Love can create. So if you want to go full team mystery, she learned how to sew, she learned how to create, and understanding Maria's past through the grimoire, with that love, she connected with her to bring her out of the Golden Land to have the shot at bringing her family back to the younger her. And I think that's more poignant than whatever Beatrice wants to stand for. And in the flashes of red text, that Kyle just went through, how can I even love anybody? The truth is there.
Is there something super obvious that we're failing to recognize here, Kyle?
I mean, I would, from the mystery perspective, I think there's a couple things. This is not going to come back to, so like I would like to resolve it here if we're going to resolve this from a mystery side. I think you kind of touched on it a bit, Capelli. So the statement that Beatrice could not finish was Rosa made it for her daughter's birthday, and in the entire world, only one of its kind, and that statement could not be finished. So why is it that Angie could revive Sakataro when Beatrice could not?
Because she understands the Sakatoro through the grimoire. She gets it. She understands it. She may not have schematics. She was able to build it in the likeness that has been described to her, which was described to her from a place of love, right? If my toddler comes and explains something to me as, I love this thing because of whatever features, I, as somebody who loves my kid, will do my damnedest to recreate it.
Okay, that's fair. Couple of points I want to remind. There was a moment in an earlier part we read where Angie sees something and is suddenly like, this is why I was brought here.
I have not been able to figure out what that is.
She found another Sakataro.
Like maybe Rosa made a second one?
Or maybe like a pattern that Rosa created to make Sakataro from. Maybe I'm thinking about this too literally, but I actually did completely forget about that.
Oh, I see. That makes sense.
Hold on. What are you guys talking about? How could she have found this thing?
So as she went to the boat captain's house, right? And as they were leaving,
oh yeah.
They're like in like the store that sells like bedding and stuff like that. She sees something and she's like, "Oh my god!" And everyone's like, "What are you talking about? What are you looking at?" And she's like, "This is why I was brought to this island. This is my purpose. Now I no longer have to go kill myself. This is how I'm going to resolve all of the things." And so I will give this bit of info. In one version of this game, the background art literally shows a pile of Sakataros in the background of that shot.
There we go.
Oh my god! So she didn't make it. She just found it and bought it. Poof.
I wonder what that means then, because she does say in red, Rosa made it for her daughter's birthday, and is that meant to imply that maybe Rosa doesn't in fact work as a fashion company? Or
it's hard to say. Yeah, you could make the case that it was made from a pattern, as y'all kind of mentioned. Maybe this was a pattern that was pre-made and Rosa just put it together, or maybe she did sell the pattern and her company actually made a bunch of them, and this happens to be some of the. It's not entirely clear, but from this Reddit, it would seem that at least there were multiple Sakataro dolls out there, and Angie, having found one, was able to bring it back to the island, and thus Sakataro was able to be revived.
Mm. That's so funny that they literally just left that in the art for one of the iterations of the game.
Really crazy. Yeah, so I really love that scene, though, because you can see the moment where Beatrice, she realizes what happened, and she's just so sad for Maria. And she's like, yeah, it's magic. They're both crying, and they both just say, like, we're not going to talk about this anymore. Like, it was magic. That's why Sakataro is brought back to life. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, this is also Beato realizing in action how Rosa has neglected Maria. Like, oh yeah, that hits.
Like, this was like the one thing that she did that was redeeming.
Yep.
And it's like, not even that.
No. Fuck. You know Rosa's bad when the 1,000-year-old witch who's been torturing and murdering and ripping people apart is like, damn, that's cold.
But yeah, so that is the end of episode 4, at least the main part of it. Of course, we still have the tea party and question mark segments for next time. That's going to be about 2.5 hours of the VN, and that's video 72 and 73 of the YouTube playlist. And I think we're also, I'm also going to have y'all read, we're going to read Bernkastel's letter, The Witches Tanabata Isn't Sweet, and Memoirs of the Lambdadelta. And those are like, I would say the only 3 side stories that really are worth reading of the ones that I've seen, but they're also like really, really solid ones. And they give you some really good perspectives of the game from some of the higher level witches' perspectives.
Very cool.
So yeah, so question mark, and tea party, and those 3 will be our reading for next time.
Neat.
And once again, thank you all for joining us. I'm glad that we this was a long one. There's a lot that went on in this one. I'm glad we managed to get through it, and I'm really looking forward to seeing this next section. Which, I mean, every section's good, but I think the next part is kind of where we're finishing off episode 4, and that's going to be a really nice place for us to kind of once we do that, we'll have our regular message bottle segment. And we're probably going to have an episode where we just kind of take stock and really kind of take a shot at some of these mysteries once they've all been kind of compiled. And we'll see if we want to take a look at the epitaph, or if we want to just kind of give our perspectives of where we're standing at that point before we move on into the quote-unquote answer arcs, which are going to give us kind of hints as to more stuff of what's going on. And so if you want to try and like take a pure shot at solving mysteries, then at the end of episode 4 is definitely a place to do that. So we'll see how that goes.
Hell yeah.
So yeah, once again, thanks y'all for joining us. I hope you all enjoyed us talking about all this stuff. And remember to think off meta.